Hey people, this is Amani. Welcome to my podcast Chat to Amani, #BrainBabble, a little offshoot from our Ep8 for Amani Instagram page. I hope to document and share the highs and the lows and everything in between of my life since being diagnosed with incurable brain cancer. So in this episode, I thought I'd talk about the MRI scan that I have once every 3 months and kind of what the process involves and how it feels for me. There's a word that a lot of people use in the cancer community called scanxiety, and it is such a real thing, and I thought it might be quite good to kind of talk about my personal experience. So I have an MRI scan every 3 months, and that is obviously to just keep track of kind of what's going on with my tumour and to just keep everyone up to date on what's obviously going on literally inside my head. But the process isn't easy, and even though it's quite a regular thing now, I guess for me, the anxiety that surrounds it just doesn't ever seem to get any easier. So pretty much every MRI scan I'm always very anxious in the lead up to it. So my family, they'll get the date from the oncologist of when it is, and they normally won't tell me until quite close to when it is, because otherwise I really do work myself up about it. It plays on my mind a lot. And it's just not nice to have, weeks upon weeks kind of counting down the days with this MRI that looms over my head and obviously what the results could be. So like I've said, I've had quite a few of these, and every single time it comes up to it, I keep thinking, I'm sure this time, I'll be okay. Generally, a lot of the scans are obviously early-ish. So the night before, just to save time and to reduce the kind of stress, I'll lay out what I want to wear the day before. It has to be comfy, quite loose fitting, because you have to roll up your sleeves because they have to insert a cannula. But also it's always very, very cold in the MRI machine rooms, and depending on what scan you're getting done, obviously depends on how long you're going to be in there. I'll also take off all my jewellery, anything that has metal in it. So even with the clothes that I wear, I have to make sure there's no metal, because the MRI machine is a big magnet, so you can't wear anything metal. 2 hours before the MRI scan, you can't eat anything. So the drive to the cancer centre, because our local hospital doesn't actually have an MRI machine, is about 40 minutes, and Mum will sit in the back with me. A couple of times at the start we used to do the drive and I would sit by myself in the back. But I would always get really panicky. So now, just to help that, Mum will sit with me in the back seat so that I know there's someone there. We'll hold hands and take deep breaths. The only way I can describe it is kind of like just the last place you want to go. The drive, because you're dreading it, the drive just feels like forever. Obviously it's the same, the cancer centre is the same place that I had my radiotherapy, and it just is really traumatic, the whole place. I just hate it. I just don't want to be there. As we get nearer the hospital, my anxiety gets higher and higher pretty much every time we get there. I say the same thing. I'm just like, I don't want to go. I just don't want to go. And I know my parents, they hate it that obviously I get upset, but they'd always turn around to me and say, we know, we don't want to take you there either, but we have to know what's going on. It always takes a bit of encouragement to get me out of the car, because there's just nowhere I'd less rather be. Then you obviously walk into the hospital, you sign in, you sit down and just wait to be called. You have to fill in a form, which Mum helps me do. They'll ask stuff like, are you a risk of seizures, which I am? Have you had brain surgery, which I have from my biopsy? And then other stuff kind of like, do you have any metal implants? Because like I said, you can't have anything metal in there. And then you have to sign the forms. Then you just wait in the waiting room, and then just before you go in, they'll take your height and weight. Again, the wait just always feels like forever. I normally try and sit and do something to distract myself. I might read a book or just do anything to pass the time. And then eventually they'll say your name, and obviously my parents aren't allowed with me in the MRI room, but Mum will walk me to this little side room where they double check. They ask you, have you got anything metal? And Mum will be with me for that. And then the lady will come in and just kind of explain how long it's going to be. And I remember this time the lady was like, oh, you're a regular, been here before. And I just remember that kind of breaking my heart. I don't want to be a regular here. You want to be a regular, your favourite local restaurant, not a cancer treatment centre. The machine is very, very loud. I think people don't realise how loud it is. And this time I was actually getting my MRI scan done for my head and my spine, so it's slightly longer. It's just a huge tunnel and it's a huge machine. It makes a lot of clanging sound. So she came out and she was like, oh, we can play some music. What music do you want? And she brought like this menu to me. And I just remember reading it and thinking, I have never heard of any of these. It's because they were all really like old songs from like back in the day. Because the lady was like, oh yeah, we don't have anything modern. Just recently we were saying that we probably should, but it's just because I'm quite rare, the fact that I am so young. It's really difficult for me and my family whenever we go to this cancer centre and we sit around in the waiting room. There are obviously other patients there, but everyone is like 3 times my age. I never see anyone my age there. I'm always the youngest, and obviously it's not nice for anyone at any age to be unwell, but I just think it's really harder to process, I guess, when you lose your health at such a young age, because it's always associated with being an older person problem. So you get in to the MRI room. You have to position yourself so your head's in this kind of like block pillow, and then they put a pillow under your legs to try and make you comfortable. They'll put a blanket, and then they insert the cannula, which is not super painful one. I feel like I'm quite used to it, but obviously it's a needle. They give you small earplugs which you put into your ears, and then on top of that they put like big kind of like building site headphones they put on top. The radiographers, they can talk to you through the headphones, so they'll explain that like you're about to go in now, this part of the scan will be 5 minutes, and then you go in there and it kind of vibrates, it kind of shakes your brain. I always have a headache afterwards, and you just move in and out, and then they'll give you words of encouragement like you're doing well, this next bit might be 3 minutes. All in all I was in there for like 45 minutes. They come in midway, they'll inject the contrast dye, which obviously goes to the brain, which helps show up more on the scan. Then the scan will carry on. I just close my eyes and I just kind of wait for it to be over, really. Once it is over, they'll come out, they'll help you sit up, just make sure you steady yourself, and then you go back to the waiting room. They wait for a bit, like take your cannula out, make sure that you're okay, you don't have a reaction to the contrast dye that they inject, and then once that's over you're free to go home. The whole process, even though you lay down and you don't move, it's just exhausting, and I'm just desperate to get out. You can't get me out any quicker. I just want to be home. The second I get home, straight into my pyjamas, and I just want to forget about it. But the truth of the matter is you can't forget about it, because that is only the first part. The MRI scan itself, the reason it's so scary and there is so much scanxiety as they call it, it's not actually for most people the scan, it's the wait for the results of that scan. The only way I can explain it is actually the day that I had to go get the results of my scan was the same day as people were getting their GCSE results. But you can't revise for an MRI scan. You can't revise, you can't practice, you have no control at all over what those results are going to be. And the nerves and anxiety that people feel, just like I did when I did my exams, that horrible feeling, you feel like your life depends on it. But the difference is with these MRI scans, really and truly my life does depend on it. So that wait for me and my family is just horrible. So we got called in to actually get the results. Sometimes they do it over the phone, but this time we had to go in, which meant another trip a few days later to go get them. And actually I had been feeling a bit stronger in myself than probably my last scan, but part of me was worried to even hope for anything positive, because sometimes when you get too hopeful and the outcome isn't what you want, the fall hurts more. And I thought maybe it was just more of a mental thing that I was feeling a bit better in myself, because I've been almost 1.5 years now, and I thought maybe I was just kind of coming to terms with the situation that I'm in, and I was just adjusting to my new reality. So again, the drive was horrible. Sat in the back, very shaky, anxious, tearful. You get to the hospital, the same thing. Don't want to get out, but also I'm just thinking the quicker we get in, maybe the quicker we can get out. Again, you're just surrounded by a lot of other ill people. It's just a horribly depressing place. And again, like I said, I'm pretty much the youngest one there. Eventually, after a long wait, which feels like forever, we got called in, and I don't even remember kind of how it goes. They obviously just ask how you're doing, then they get the report up and they talk about the tumour, and I just remember him the oncologist basically saying it's a pretty good scan. And then he talked certain measurements, and obviously at the time it's just a lot to process. But he said, your tumour shrunk. And I kind of remember a sound just kind of escaped me. And it was like almost like a sob, but like a sob of relief. You know, he was explaining all these more finer details that were good things, like how much it had shrunk and it had moved away from the brainstem, which is a good thing. And that overall it was quite positive. There were obviously other areas that they want to monitor, but all in all they were like, this is a very, very good result. And later on, you know, they got up the scans, and then we were able to see that comparatively the tumour size then and now is actually smaller. So it shrunk back to smaller than it was. And a while before I was rushed into hospital, I had no idea that there was a tumour in my head. And the medication had shown some promise, but we were hoping and praying that maybe one day it would shrink to that amount and maybe I'd be able to have more of a normal life. But we just didn't think it was possible. I got home and we had my sisters down to tell them the news, and we just burst into tears. You know, for the first time ever, it wasn't because it was terrible news, and it wasn't like tears of sorrow and just fear. It was tears of relief. Like, we just couldn't believe it. We were so grateful, obviously, to God. We did an extra prayer, made extra dua, just thanking God for allowing this to happen, and also just because we were so grateful to all the people that had put their hands in their pockets to donate to the GoFundMe to enable me to have this drug, which at the time we weren't even sure if it was going to work for me. It was just a really special moment after a year and a half of just constant knockbacks and just terrible news. This was the first bit of good news, and like, I know that there's a long way to go and it's not going to be straightforward, and there will still be ups and downs, and it's still very scary, and I will still be just as anxious in 3 months' time for my next scan. But we just know how important it is to cling on to these moments and celebrate these moments. So we had my family around that evening, we had a meal together, because life is so short, and especially in this situation we just know how important it is to just grasp those moments of happiness and to cling on to that hope and to just keep going, because who knows now. We hope and pray that the medication keeps working and we keep seeing these positive results, because then who knows what my future holds. It's still scary in some ways to even hope, for me anyway, because I know how things can just change in an instant. But for now, I'm going to be so grateful for this, and I'm going to keep trying to make the most of every single moment.
Everyone has their fight, so let's ready our armies and let the battle commence, because we're not going down without a fight. Like, comment, share and subscribe. I've always wanted to say that.